Welcome to the Sharon Fitzmaurice podcast, where we celebrate the resilience of the human spirit. I'm really excited about returning to give training in Reiki and Seikим to my students, and also returning to Delphi Resort for our last weekend retreat for 2025. You can check out my upcoming events on sharonfitzmauricemindfulness.com. As always, thank you for sharing, following, and subscribing to this podcast and sharing my guests' amazing stories. But now, on to our next guest. Caroline Conroy is the creator of Yoga Walks Ireland, offering unique experiences that blend gentle yoga, mindful walking, and the hidden stories of Ireland's wild and beautiful places. Once a business professional, Caroline followed the call of her heart to a life of healing and connection. She spent decades guiding people back to themselves through yoga, spiritual healing, and soulful retreats. Today, she leads groups along forest trails, ancient mountain paths, and sacred sites, weaving in stretches, breathwork, meditations, and the magic of Irish folklore. In winter, she brings her nurturing classes indoors, and she also hosts retreats in breathtaking locations around the country. Caroline, you are very welcome.
Thank you, Sharon. Thanks for inviting me today. That was a wonderful introduction. I learned a lot about myself there.
And isn't it amazing, and as a host of a podcast, but also being a guest on podcasts, when we have to write an introduction or a bio to ourselves and condense it into two or three paragraphs, it can be sometimes strange. But again, I think even with yours, it's the simplicity, but the profoundness of what you do. And doing it in nature is one of the most beautiful spaces we can do any of our work. As I said to you, I'm not in a studio, I'm sitting in my dining room looking out into my garden because nature inspires me, it calms me, it makes me feel like I'm part of it and not locked away in a dark room somewhere, cut away from everybody. So I just love the work that you do. And I think we're going to talk a little bit more about it now. And you can lead us into the beauty of everything that you do. Now, what's interesting, Caroline, is you started off in a more business professional side, even though I say you have a business now. But when you look back and you think about where you are in your life and where you are now, what was the huge difference in that both businesses?
Yeah, so I suppose the first section of my life was very geared about my conditioning and my upbringing. So, I mean, I was an only child. We lived in a very unusual house, and both my parents worked and had very good jobs at the time. And my mother was a woman and still alive to this day. She's 86, but she loved figures and numbers and accounting and all that. And really, I didn't have a choice. I was guided, forced, pushed, dragged, pulled, screaming into that way of being. And of course, that wasn't who I was at all. So when I was very, very young, I'm here looking at myself now on the screen on the podcast, and I'm thinking, oh God, that's gray hair. I can see curly gray hair. That I can see myself. But when I was young, I you can still see there's a bit of red. I was a redhead, curly red hair, curly teeth, and white skin.
I love that
So
description.
I was a red flag for any men, definitely, Sharon. But what I was when I was young was I was very much in my own space. I lived a lot of the time in my own head. My parents, as I said, worked a lot, so I was on my own a lot. Um, and our house was very unusual when I was younger as well. It was originally a pub and shop. And when my parents bought it, they converted it into a house. But on all sides of the house was a graveyard. So at the back of the house, there was a graveyard. To the side of the house, there was a graveyard. And from my own bedroom window across the road, I could see a graveyard.
Wow.
So my playground as a child was in the graveyard. So when I was very, very young, I would bring my little tea set. I don't know if you remember, I'm 57 now, so this is way back in the day when we played. And I used to have a little tea set in a picnic basket. And I'd have the little cups and the saucers and the little teapot. And so I would climb out over the back garden wall into the graveyard. And I would go into a tomb, and in the tomb, it was a priest, God love him, from Kildare. I used to get in beside. So I'd go down into the tomb, and it was like a crypt, and you'd see all the skulls lined up, because there was obviously whole families in that crypt.
Mm.
And I'd sit inside with my picnic basket and my cup of tea, and I'd give them all a sip. So I went around to each skull, and they all had a sip of the tea. And I just loved that, not a bit afraid of it. I mean, it was my playhouse. We used to call them cabby houses years ago. So that was my cabby house or my playhouse. And then as I suppose I got a little bit older, I became very intrigued about their stories. Who were they? What was their role when they were here in life? Where did they live? Where did they come from? Did they have children? Were they happy people? Were they sad people? So to have all these amazing conversations with these skeletons and skulls, and I became intrigued about where did they go? Where were they now? And so as a child, you're not going to go into school
Yeah.
and just say, well, what did you do yesterday evening? Oh, sure, well, I was above having the tea party with the crew in the graveyard. So I suppose it became very much my own world that I was creating, that I was very happy in, that I had lovely conversations with people that weren't really talking in the real sense, but that I was able to sort of communicate in some way with. And then I remember as I got a little bit older, I think maybe they followed me down to the house or something because sleeping became a huge problem when I was young. I felt there was always people around me, even though there was nobody in the house. I was being watched or looked at. I heard a lot of noises that nobody else heard. I heard a lot of voices that nobody else heard. I saw a lot of people that nobody else saw. So much so that bedtime as like a 6, 7-year-old was terrifying. So my parents decided that they'd get a single bed and move me in to their room. Obviously, not ideal, is it? But I was there until I was 14 because I suppose the fear of that other world then as well was there. And really seeing people and things like that. And I remember, saying to my parents when we'd be watching telly downstairs, I'd say to them, I'd say, are you hearing the carry on upstairs? Are you hearing the racket in the other room? And they'd be saying, oh, that's the central heating pipes expanding, or it's the wind blowing a door. And I was always sort of fobbed off. So I don't really know if they heard it or not.
Mm.
But I definitely could hear all this. Then as you get a little older, you don't really, you want to fit in. You want to be like everybody else. You want to be the best daughter. Um, you want to follow the conventional path and the route, that other people are taking. And so I did. I sort of morphed into this other image that I had to please everybody else, as we do. Was I
Yes,
happy?
Caroline.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
I hear you in so many ways, and I'm sure it could be a story of many people, that you were like forced, dragging, kicking, and screaming to be what, your parents or society or whoever wanted you to be conventional and fit in and get the good job. But if we go back to you as the child, and being an only child, it seems even that loneliness, maybe, even though you're happy in yourself and having your tea parties, and, you know, what I loved was, the curiosity that we have as children and that we're curious about people, even if they're not here in this world anymore. And I'm sure many people would even be afraid as an adult to go into a graveyard, but as a child, it's just another playground, and that we don't have that instilled fear. Maybe as we get older, it's instilled more and more. But how you found peace in it, and even fun and joy and company, with those that were passed before us, physically, and you started connecting with them. That's a real wonder of childhood. And I think it's something that people forget, that we're very connected to the spiritual world as children, and we don't see it as separate to us. But of course, when it becomes fearful for you and you're feeling them all around you, it does change the way you think or want to connect with them. So moving into your parents' room until you're 14, absolutely, yes, not ideal for you. But I suppose maybe it made your parents feel like they were protecting you or keeping you safe. Did you lose that connection as you
Yeah.
morphed into the professional?
So I never lost the connection as such, but I buried it, I think, for years. And it took a lot of years, and it wasn't actually, it was somebody else brought it back to the forefront because then obviously I was able to straighten the curly hair and straighten the curly teeth and put on the tan over the white skin. And I met himself, So we were only, I remember going out together, and I remember my parents thinking, they'd like a weekend away. They were pure delighted to be getting away after 14 years of me inside in the bedroom with them. But they were heading off. I was now, I think, I was like my early 20s at this stage. I had done the dutiful role of going to college and, getting lovely jobs actually, but jobs that weren't who I was. They were jobs that my parents loved to see me in. I made great friends along the way, had great crack and great fun, but they weren't the full expression of who I was. And then I remember I met my husband. I met himself, and my parents were heading off on that holiday. And I remember saying to him, "No, the house is free, come over." So there was no, mobile phones or anything. It took a long time to get that message to him, to come on. So he arrived on, and we were very back that time, you were totally green to it all. Um, but he was great. He was going to actually stay the night. So
Good.
he was delighted and I was delighted. We were going to have a great night. We were at a great start, and we were very polite and nice and everything at the beginning. And then we said, we'd move upstairs to the bedroom. So I got in and he got into the bed, and it was lovely, at the beginning, all the kissing and cuddling and the whole lot. And then in like a sort of a flash. He was on my left side in the bed, but he got catapulted out of the bed. So he went right over me and landed in a tub chair in the room. And he was like roaring, "Turn on the light, turn on the light." And so I was there, "Jeez, what's wrong?" And he said, "Who in the name of Christ is living in this house with you?" And I was saying, nobody.
Mm.
And he said, "Well, I'm just after getting pulled out of the bed and swung across." And he goes, "I need to go home." And he was trying to grab his clothes and everything to run out of the house. So I had to calm him down and go, "It's okay. You're after seeing now somebody I've been seeing for years." And he goes, "How do you mean you're seeing people for years?" And I said, "Lots of people are in this house." So it was wonderful. We were able to, in time, sit down, go through ancestral records, go through church records, go through birth certs and death certs, go through grave headstones, and find the physical people that were dead with years, but that I had seen in this environment that I lived in. So the priest at the time was very good. He helped me with records. I found family relatives. So there was one particular man that was in our house from when I was young called Seamus. And I found out, so he was dead with years. But this is the man also my husband got the introduction to in the bedroom. And Seamus died on a public road. He got knocked down on his bike. He was a county council worker, And that time, back in the day, Sharon, pubs were also places that if you died on a public road, you'd be laid out like the mortuaries that we have now in the pub. So obviously Seamus was laid out and never decided to leave.
Yeah.
But for some reason, I was able to see, in and out of these places. And so that was a wake up call, and it got me really curious about, what I was seeing, you know, were they real, were they not real? And so I began to get really curious and explore that side of life,
Mm.
which was amazing. So that by exploring that side of life, I suppose it drew me completely into unseen and the unheard world.
Mm.
And how do we access that world from here? And then I realized, well, we all can. We can
Absolutely.
all access the unheard and the unseen, but you have to bring yourself to a place where you can access it.
Mm.
And
Absolutely.
we know now within our body that we have one specific gland that is planted within the physical body that can access that divine sacred place that's within all of us. So that one gland that brings us that access is the pineal gland. And in our world, we'd have called that, your third eye, your higher consciousness. You can call it whatever you want.
Yeah.
So the gland is the gland that we channel through or that we move through within our physical body to bring us to that lovely divine place. And if you look back through the history books, Sharon, you will find that there was a lot of people down through the ages in authority that knew about the pineal gland. And my daughter was in Rome last year and she took loads of photographs because she went to the Vatican, it was part of the tour or part of the trip. And I said to her, well, did you see the images of the pineal gland everywhere in the Vatican? And she goes, you're nuts. What are you talking about? Are you correct? And I said, take out the photographs of where you were in the Vatican and all the squares, and all the
Mm.
lovely courtyards. In every courtyard, in every square, there is a symbol of the pineal gland, which is like a pine cone. It looks
Mm.
like a pine cone. You'll see it, it's on the top of the Pope's staff. You'll see, the Buddhas, they have the pine
Yeah.
cone on their head, all the little. And so I suppose it's about keeping that muscle, the pineal gland muscle. It's about keeping it fresh. It's about keeping it healthy. It's about keeping it energized so that we have access, to that divine essence, that divine connection, that unseen, that unheard, that we have access to that wisdom, to that intuition. And lots of people, if you look up the history books as well, Hitler seemed to know about a lot about the pineal gland because apparently he used to give fluoride to his captives. And we know now, of course, that fluoride is the one thing that calcifies the pineal gland. And after World War, I think it was the American government started using fluoride in the water systems. And sure, we all have it now. It's
Mm.
part of. So it's about being mindful about what calcifies, the pineal gland as well, that entry, that place within
Mm.
us. So yeah, so I flipped, going back to your question, I flipped from that business world, all that study in business
Mhm.
colleges and marketing and accounting and administration and traveling and to this other world, you know, the world where I felt I was me, I was
Mm.
more myself. And having spoken to those lovely people in the tomb,
Mm.
wondering how were they the full expression of themselves when they were alive? And then, did they fulfill it before they passed? And I think I made from having the conversations at the tea party with them to
Mm.
they were very. I valued them in so many ways because they, put me on that path in so many ways to value the life I have now.
Mm.
Um, but every day is still a learning, every day is a transformation. But I suppose my biggest learning after coming out of that world and going into, we'll call it more the holistic type of, the walks and the retreats and the classes and the whole lot. I suppose it's the same line, it's the same energy goes through everything I think I do in this new world now.
Mm.
So I've done so many courses and classes like yourself, Sharon. I've done color therapy, trained in Reiki, integrated energy, went and trained as a bereavement counselor for children, a life coach, a yoga teacher, a spiritual healer. I could, there's certs all over they're gone now.
Yeah.
But there's certs everywhere and anywhere, because we go on this journey, of trying to find, well, what's sort of missing? Well, if I have better health, I'll be this way. If I have more money, I'll be this, I'll be more myself, I'll feel more fulfilled. If I have a better relationship. And we always think there's something missing, we always think, you know, there's something missing. But the truth is, everything that we've done from zero up to now has brought us here.
Mm.
And you have to sort of assess yourself and take responsibility for everything you've done in my last 57 years. And then I have to also realize, well, I was a participant in everything I've also done for the last 57 years, whether it's good or bad, I was
Mhm.
the participant.
Yeah.
So you have to take responsibility for that part of you as well, that side of you. But then you come to a realization and you go, okay, I've got here, everything I've done, taken responsibility for, participated in, has gotten me here. But is this who I want to be now?
Mm.
Who do I want to be? How do I best want to express myself into the world? So I've had lots of moments along the way where I'm going, whoa, put on the brakes. Nope, this is not me. So it's only in the last few years, I think, Sharon, that I have realized that who I want to be is someone of that will express peace and joy and healing and harmony
Mm.
into the world. And I want to be the best expression of that.
And isn't that a beautiful expression? Because at the end of the day, we all want, and everyone I speak to, and clients and in the retreats and everything, everyone wants peace. But it's finding that peace within yourself, isn't it, Caroline? As you said, going back, getting curious, listening to the conversations and the wisdom that those, deceased, physically deceased, beautiful souls had to share with you. And again, as we open up to that beautiful divine energy, I always say the answers are there because they're within us all, that inner wisdom. And it's a remembering of who you are, at source. And we try to be like you try to fulfill your parents' wishes and society's wishes. And many people have done that over the years and are still trying to do that for others. And that's the gap, and that's what's missing in their life. And for me, it is sometimes the simplicity. It was like, what is it I need today? Or what is best for me? Or how can I help myself today? But I love the fact that, when you met your husband and Seamus threw him out of the bed because Seamus was probably thinking, that's my girlie there, get out of the bed, you. And how you probably thought it as normal. And of course, your husband is like, huh, what? How can you be living with this all your life? But that's again is what's normal for others may not be normal for you, and vice versa. But who's saying what is normal? For me, living with spirit is a normal thing, that they're around us constantly, whether we choose to connect to them or not is our choice, but that we all have access to that connection. The same way we have access to that wisdom, our soul's wisdom within us. And I love that they brought you on that journey. I love that you were curious and even meeting your husband and having that interaction, it opened up you doing the research and finding out who this man was, you know. that those people existed physically in the world. It wasn't you thinking you were crazy, that these were real physical people that lived in the world, that had a life, that had relations, and they wanted to connect with somebody to show that they still exist in a different way. And I think that's so beautiful because, Caroline, as you know, there's so many people after they lose a loved one, that loss, that separation is huge for them. It can be very traumatic. And I say sometimes if you listen in that stillness, you'll hear them again, you'll feel them again, you'll connect to them again. But maybe part of our grief is to separate so that we can find that own peace within us, to find our own self, just like you did in many ways in going on your journey. I just think it's so beautiful the way you describe it, but you're also very humorous. As I know, Caroline was on one of my retreats, and that's how I met her in person. And we were sitting across the table at dinner, and I said, she has a million stories, and I could sit and listen to them all. You have a lovely humor about it. You know, it's not like you're one of these spiritual gurus up on a mountain.
No, Sharon, I always say if we do, even in my classes, people that come to my retreats, my classes, my walks, if we aren't falling around laughing for a part of it, not all of it, for a
Yeah.
part of it, well, then I haven't done my job. But I do think, because joy is part of me, but I do think what you said there, Sharon, is such an issue, such a problem for today's society. That one question is like, how, I suppose, how do we become the person we are meant to be when we don't feel totally fulfilled or whole, maybe at this stage of our life? So that's the question that I'm always answering. It's like, okay, I've arrived here now. Things aren't really going the way I was hoping. I'm not feeling the peace. I'm not feeling the joy. I'm not feeling the fun. I'm not feeling the good health. But how do I become, that? So that's no mystery. But I think people think it is. Because I do think that, as I said, there's one line of thought that runs through everything that I do, every aspect that I do. And that is what you said, how we actually go to a quiet space within ourselves to listen to the unheard, to see the unseen. But that's a lot of hard work for the majority of people. That is nearly outside of their zone because, as you know, Sharon, we have phones now, we have Wi-Fi flying around our houses, we have noise constantly, we have activities non-stop. We don't know what it's like to pull out the seat and sit under the stars for a half an hour at night. We have to feel it's every part of our lives are being filled with crap that doesn't create the lives that we actually want. So for me, it's the beginning point, it's the start point is where we need to go back to. So for example, I'll give you this, and I'm sure it's Dr. Bruce Lipton said this 20 years ago, right? But I'm going to, this is my own take on it. So we're in New York airport, right? And we're a pilot and we're going to take off from New York and we're landing in Shannon, okay? But as a pilot, we'd like to sort of have a bit of an old chill out on the journey. So we're going to program in autopilot. So we're going to plan the route, we're going to program it in, and we're going to set the plane on autopilot. So we take off, we throw ourselves back in the seat, legs up in the dash of the plane. We're having the cups of coffee. And there's a bit of a storm across the Atlantic, and the plane deviates. It might go way a few hundred miles, kilometers to the right or to the left. But we're sort of okay because we have it on autopilot, and the plane does land in Shannon and everyone is fine. But for me, the autopilot is actually where we need to adjust. Because I remember a lovely friend of mine. And you're not going to adjust your autopilot. There's only two ways to adjust your autopilot. You're either going to get one negative rap in your life. So you're either going to have a bad car crash, you're going to get a terrible cancer diagnosis, the worst thing is going to happen to you to change the autopilot. Or the second way of changing your autopilot is making a choice and repeating it, which is much easier way.
Mm.
But a friend of mine, she got the rap. She got the heart attack. She was rushed off to the hospital, young woman. And this was the wake-up call. This was the one that said, okay,
Mm.
you need to adjust the autopilot. So she came out of the hospital. Oh, dear God, did she change? She was on a diet straight away. We were walking 6 kilometers. We were meditating. She was doing the whole 360. And then she relaxed into it a bit and she was getting the results that she wanted. A year and a half later, she was back exactly, probably even heavier maybe as well than she was, not as fit as she was. So she had set the plane on autopilot. It had deviated. Yeah, she'd lost the weight, she'd felt healthy or whatever, but she had it, remember, on autopilot. So no matter how much work she did on herself, she was going to end back
Mm.
exactly where she started. Because she hadn't changed the plan at the beginning. The plan for me is yourself, the
Mm.
self-image. What is it, For me, that autopilot programming is peace, is harmony, is joy, is healing.
Mm.
But she was still on the old program, the old. So no matter what she did, Sharon, no matter how much miles she walked, no matter how much exercise, no matter how much dieting, it wasn't going to work because inside the internal system was still programmed at the old view of herself.
Mm.
So,
Yeah.
how do we become the person we're meant to be? You have to change the autopilot. How do we change the autopilot? You have to, like we said at the very beginning of the podcast, you have to stop. You have to slow down. You have to go in deep into that divine presence, that divine energy that lies within us. You have to go beyond the five senses. You have to go into the sixth one and the seventh one and the eighth one. So we all know the five, don't we? The hearing, the sight, the touching, we know our five senses. The sixth sense for me was having the chat inside in the tombstone. That's your sixth sense. That's your intuition telling you I'm having a conversation with these people. I'm knowing things I couldn't possibly know.
Mm.
I'm seeing Mary coming into her yoga class. Oh, Jesus, I know straight away. She's carrying the burdens of the world. She's over cooperating at home. She's cooking dinners for adult children. Actually, you can see it by the way she walks in the door. So your intuition is telling you things you think you couldn't possibly know, but you do know. That's your sixth sense.
Mm.
But then there's the seventh one, isn't there? So the seventh sense is the lovely one. It's the one where we can sit back and observe our own thinking,
Mm.
our own thoughts. So now we're the observer of our thinking, the observer of our thoughts. So this is where the program kicks in because now we're adjusting the program within ourselves. And when all that then is working together, when all senses are working together, you're then in your eighth sense. So I haven't gone beyond the eighth one, but I only get glimpses of the eight. I only get when I'm up that mountain, when we're walking, when we're doing yoga above, when I'm in my yoga class, when I'm in a retreat with somebody. That's where the eighth sense for me kicks in. So the eighth sense is when we feel whole and at one with everything. And
Mm.
that's what yoga is. If you translate the word back, it's union, it's yoke. So I don't know whether I was born coming in with that yoke, that union in me someplace, but that is the lovely feeling people get when they come on the walks or when they come to the classes. They feel for that hour, they feel totally connected to themselves, to everybody around them, to the floor they're sitting on, to the breath they're taking in. There's no separateness. Everything is in whole. It's feeling that feeling of being fulfilled. And the more we practice the yoga, the moves, the stretches, the more we practice the breathing, all that goes on, you know yourself in a yoga class, The more we do all that, we're not doing it to get anything because we don't want to get anything, but we're doing it to observe what we need to actually tell, let go, what we need to get rid of. We can see then what is disturbing our route to peace, what is our disturbing our route to joy, what is blocking it from flowing through us. Because now we're at one with everything. So, we are the earth. We are, what's blocking that? And then we become very good at removing what's creating a block, from it coming out of us. We have it inside of us. But and for me, that's that flow, that peace, that joy, that harmony, that's God for me. But I dropped the God conditioning years ago of being a man in heaven that's judgmental. You're God to
Mm.
me. The trees, like you, I'm looking out onto my garden. The trees outside are God. The skulls above in the tombstone were God. My dog is God. Anywhere I am, I'm surrounded and fulfilled by God. So we are a whole expression of God in a way. So I don't like to separate the God, if you get me. When I'm going for my walk, I'm totally supported by God. The air that I breathe, the trees surrounding me, everything. The people that come to my classes, they're there to teach me. They're teaching me things that I need maybe to let go of. So it's coming to that eighth sense. It's bringing people so they can dip their toe in. And what does it feel like when I'm in that eighth sense, when I'm in that energy, when I've access to it, when I can channel in through that pineal gland, when I
Hmm.
can go in there to the divine. And what is the divine at the end of the day? It is self. It is the I am. It is who you are. You are God. We are God, you
Yes,
know.
and there's many people, and I'm sure they have said it to you, Caroline, when they go to your retreats, is, oh, I'd love to just stay here because this is where I feel so calm and peaceful, and it's just so lovely. And then I have to go back out into reality. And I'd say your reality is what you carry inside of your own mind and your thoughts and beliefs within your body, and you bring it into your world and you create that
Oh.
reality through your choices. But I
And
ask you, sorry, Caroline.
and I love that, Sharon. Sorry now for cutting in because you've popped it into my head. That is a huge obstacle for people. How do I bring this home with me? I go up the mountain every day. That's where I really indulge in peace and joy and healing and feeling fulfilled. But for years, Sharon, I didn't know how to bring it down the mountain and bring it into my home. But now I know. There's a really simple technique, really simple. You'll know this because you did it with us when I was up with you. It's called anchoring. So if you think of being at the class, so we're up the mountain, we're at a walk, we're in the trees, the beautiful Etchecran River, the healing river. We're doing beautiful old rituals, old ceremonies that were done in the mountain years ago. We're bringing these lovely healing, hands-on healing. Touch is so important for people. We bring these lovely hands-on healing rituals and ceremonies with us on our walk. We do them. And they do that. They just go, oh, can we have a sleepover here?
Yeah.
Can we just throw ourselves down? We don't want to go home to the busyness, how will I bring that down the mountain with me? But how it's so simple. Sister Alba is a lovely friend of mine from India, and she taught me this because I used to be always saying this to her. And she said, you get the feeling when you're in the mountain or in the class, wherever it is that you can find that sense of what it is you want to become. Remember, you have to know that first, autopilot. Remember that
Mm.
you're flying from New York to Shannon.
Yeah.
So once you know who you want to become, and you find that in the mountain, or you find it in a class. I'm finding peace in a class, joy, fun in a class. That's what I want to become. You anchor it into your body. So how I like to anchor it in, I remember saying Sister Elba, oh, I'll anchor it in by putting my hands on my heart. And she was there, oh, very good. See how that goes now when you're in a meeting with someone and they'll be looking at you. They'll be saying, what the fuck is she doing? Because, you could be in a real tough meeting, and suddenly you're trying to find peace and you're doing this and they're all going, what the name of Jesus? So the way I do it is two fingers and I just hold my wrist and I put it on my pulse and I go, bring that feeling back down, program it back in. It's just getting the feeling of what I had up in the mountain and just putting it, anchoring it into my body. So I just anchor it back in, bring the feeling of peace down, bring the feeling of relaxation with me, that lovely feeling of calm, anchor it back into the body. And after a while, you can anchor tons of stuff. You can look out the window in the morning and see a lovely sunrise and you go, you know what, I'm gonna anchor that in today. I'm gonna
Mm,
anchor that feeling. Or you could get a nice hug from a little child,
mm,
that and you say, oh, I'm gonna anchor that in. What happens when you start anchoring in? It's like you're a glass and there's shitty water at the end of it and mucky stuff, right? But if you keep anchoring in, if you keep filling your glass with all this beautiful stuff that's giving you peace and joy, well, the brown, gritty stuff, it's like filling a glass with pure water. The brown, gritty stuff eventually rises up to the top and spills out over the glass. And
mm.
eventually, if you keep filling it with that beautiful sense of who you want to be, it becomes that. That's what's in your glass then you
Yeah.
know so it's about learning to anchor it in. And another lady, I was telling her this at the class one day and she said, oh, I brought that home, I do that another way, she said. So she has a little sheet of paper in her kitchen and a pen, and she just takes one day out of the week and she writes down every time she has a moment of joy.
Mm.
She sits down and watches Home and Away at 1 o'clock. She goes, oh, I'm going to write that down, that was a joyful moment today, my lunch break. So she writes down all her joyful moments and she brings the piece and the pen and the paper with her. And it could be something as simple as sitting in the car in traffic and instead of listening to, I hate saying a podcast, instead of listening to something on the radio or a podcast or a meditation, just do nothing. Do nothing for 5 minutes while you're just do nothing. Like we're so filling of that time. And she'd write that down. I had 5 minutes to myself. I'd often say to my yoga people, lie down there and rest your bones. Like, actually let your bones lie down on the floor.
Mm.
And even saying it to them, just allow your bones there to rest for a while. It's a lovely feeling to even leave your bones become heavy and rest, but it's a lovely way to creating what you want to become, isn't it?
And it is so beautiful. And I think, again, even through the conversation, it is that stillness. But I think for many people, in the awareness of it, they're not aware of their busyness until they maybe hit rock bottom or they hit a challenge in their life or their relationship breaks down or their job becomes stressful and they're burnt out. That many people in the world over are running on that old programming, on the autopilot, and they have not that conscious awareness until they do. So for me, it's always about having the awareness of it. It's like you being aware of spirit, and it wasn't until you met your husband and then he became aware of Seamus in the house as well that you became more curious and started creating something that, oh, well, what is this unseen? What is this unheard that I'm so used to living with? And what is it and how is it going to bring fulfillment into my life? It's not just going to be a sideline where I'm going having tea as I did as a child. And I think for many people that are going to classes like yours or anybody else's, they're finding that connection now. They're opening up to finding that peace within. And again, the challenge or struggle may be how to bring that into their now reality. And as we said, we can do that with the anchoring. But for me, it's also, as I said, we're here looking out into our beautiful gardens, and we're so blessed to be able to have this conversation and do this and love what we do. But for there's many people where they would go through a day and they haven't felt joy, or they haven't felt peace, or they haven't felt connected to themselves. So by the end of that day, they come home and they're very bedraggled and worn out and exhausted. And if you said to that person in that state, take some time for yourself, they don't know how to because there's that fear of connecting in with what they're feeling. So I go back to you talking about the feeling is the most important thing. And if I always say, because you were so lovely in describing it, that joy or the hug from a child or the dog wagging his tail or licking your hand or whatever, the very simple things, we forget the joyful moments that we've had. And I always say, if you can't remember one, go back to one even when you were a child, one happy feeling. It could have been your first ice cream cone, or for me, it was my first bar of chocolate, and I still love a bar of chocolate, not as much. But for me, it's remembering something that sparked a piece of joy or a piece of stillness for me or a piece of connection. And if I can't find it in that moment or in that day, I go back. And like you, I have a bank of them now and I can dip into them and feel them. And I think for many people, they don't know how to do that, Caroline. And that's why your classes and retreats, and especially I love the sacred rituals that you do up the mountain and hands on. I think that is so powerful that we really need to connect to ourselves through nature because, like us, we have different cycles and phases in our lives, and to be very aware of our natural surroundings. And when we actually stop and just observe the tree or observe the birds, we'll start to see and feel ourselves, won't we?
We do because the trees belong to life, the birds belong to life. The flowers belong to life. The mountain belongs to the world.
Mm,
The rivers belong to the world. But we spend so much of our time trying to control everything instead let them be,
mm,
and see that they are thriving, and they are working all of the time to
mm.
create harmony and balance. Like if we just leave them alone,
Yeah.
leave everything alone, it will all work itself out,
Mm,
on it by itself. But as you said, we have been uh, not blindfolded, but it's like these blinkers have been put
mm,
on now. Um, and it's that's why when I even bring the people on these lovely walks, and they're always beautiful places, but I sort of try to point out the unseen to them. And once they see it, you can't unsee it again.
yeah.
We pass a lovely place where three rivers meet. I always thought it was two rivers until my lovely friend Brother Anthony in Glenstall was able to fill me in with geography and said, no, there's actually a third river running under there. And I wondered why people always from the mountain went to that spot for healing.
Mm,
You know, they went to the spot for healing because you had three rivers meeting there, clashing and creating this bountiful energy that if we're standing there, will help to unblock or clear our
mm,
bodies. And going back into how they did those rituals and how there was little ceremonies around them. And then you can sort of see how they were, I suppose, gathered up or hoovered up by the church,
mm,
down through the years and then used in a little controlling way, down through the years. But going back to the point, the blinkers are on, a lot of the time for these people, and they have no sense really a lot of the time because they don't stop for 2 seconds to actually explore who do they want to become.
mm.
It will come back down. Like I see it in my own family. My daughter is nearly 30 now, but she has it nearly nailed. And like I'm 57 and I'm still working in it because like she has like if I had the courage to be somebody, who would that be? And she'd say if I had the courage to be, I would want to be fitter, I would want to be healthier, I would want to be kinder, I would want to be doing the job that would be a full expression of myself. So she's ticking off all those. And younger people, they don't for 5 minutes stay anywhere now. They're gone.
Mm.
They're not going like we sat out of fear. So you
Yeah.
had a great job. You weren't going, it's pensionable. You weren't going to leave it. But for you've sort of nailed it, Sharon. That's the nailing of it. We don't stop. So we're on this roller coaster, and God isn't driving it. It's
Hmm.
just, where I'm on the roller coaster a lot of the, but God is driving it, so I'm having the best ride of my life,
Yeah.
a lot of the time. I'm, hands up, going woo, we're dipping, we're diving, but for them, who's driving it? Have they made the connection? Have they connected with that part of themselves, that divine energy? Have they slowed down? Have they stopped? Have they gone in just to listen? Listen to the unheard. What's the divine or God or whatever you want. What is it saying? What is it telling you? And when we don't listen, you and I know, we've been there. You're going to get a pain. You're going to get an ache. It might start off small. Suddenly you have a full grown problem with your knee or your
Mm.
back or your shoulder because the messages are trying to be heard. They're trying to come up to tell you something. But sure, you're not stopping to listen. You're just not listening, you're not seeing because you're not giving yourself the time to stop, as you said, until something horrific. And that's always a negative,
Yeah.
So it's about making choices, repeating them for the positive, for the
Yeah.
good.
And sometimes I look at, it's interesting when you say that, Caroline. Sometimes I look at what we as humans with our programming conditioning, as we look at things that are negative, they actually can turn out to be a very positive or a blessing in our life. So I can say that about my own life personally. But I see other people and they'd say, I thought it was the worst thing that happened to me, losing that job or that relationship breaking down or whatever.
But
And then 5 years or 10 years or even 5 weeks later, they go, it was the best thing
Yes.
that ever happened. And it actually happened at the right time, even though I thought it was the worst. So that I say sometimes, negative and positive, it's the yin and yang, it's the balance and harmony of life. And sometimes when we're not listening or we haven't made that choice, then what happens is it's just like that brown water in the glass. It starts filling up and it takes over completely, and everything that's bad comes to the surface. You have to deal with it. You have to look at it now, and then it's your choice after that what you're going to do. But many times when there people are in that feeling of this is such a negative thing or too challenging or struggle for me, they get lost and overwhelmed in it. But in hindsight, they look back and go, oh, it was the best thing. So there's many people that I feel, and again, just as you said it, they're in this busyness of life, the conditioning and getting places and having to be this and the images and all of the stuff that they're supposed to be in life. But underneath, there isn't that contentment within that place just for them, just to be on their own with themselves, and that it's okay to have nothing to do. It's okay to be calm and quiet and not have all this stimulation and be traveling the world every 5 minutes and showing everybody on Instagram. Instead of say, I'm quite happy sitting here with my bare feet on the ground and I've reached a place where I can be with myself. And I think that's where people, when you talked about the connection to God, there's many people that don't have a connection to God or any religion, and they feel like there is nothing to be disconnected to. So they feel disconnected from themselves and from the universe, God, source, creator, whatever we want to call it. And it is hard for people, Caroline, and I'm sure you've seen that. For I can't make anybody believe, but the
Correct.
feeling, isn't it the feeling? So if you can get them to connect to a feeling that is peaceful or joyful, and you just said it and they expand on that and they keep finding little ways through the day in your classes, in your retreats, and they build on it, they're building the foundation and building up to where they can connect in with themselves. And that feeling grows and grows. And I think for me, it is the simplicity of it. And that's why I love nature. It's not rushed or hurried. And if we sit it and we sat under a tree and just connected to the earth and the tree, and people might think that is just too simplistic for me. What are you going to get? I'd want to have music on. I'd be wanting to be listening to something. I'd be looking around me. I'd be thinking about everything else. Yes, because you're used to doing it. But even if you have a moment of stillness, even if you become that observer for a few minutes, it can be the most powerful minute you have in that day. Isn't that true, Caroline?
It can be the most wondrous thing.
Mm.
Like I bring people on the walks, and at the end of the walk, I'm always near a river. But I say we're going to put our feet in just for 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Well, Sharon, you should
No.
see the meltdown that happens. Are you joking me? We've no towel. Oh my God, there's stones. Oh jeez, how are we going to? Oh, not a hope. How? There's a complete and not because we're gone so far away from even touching the earth.
Yeah.
Eventually, I'll come around them, right? And
Hmm.
eventually, they'll see one putting a toe in. Now, it's only your feet, it's only up to your ankles. And then they'll go, oh my God, we expected it to be freezing. The mountain water is never that cold. You know, the river water is never that cold. And it's
Yeah.
so soft. It's really soft
Mm.
water. They go in and it's like you could nearly feel the centering and the breath they take in, and they're there in they've been brought straight in
Yeah.
to the present moment. They're now with themselves for that. And if that's all I do, is they have now found this beautiful connection.
Mm.
With that eighth sense, they're after
Yes.
tipping into it. And I know it's really hard, Sharon, for people. I know it is. And another little fake it till you make it works are affirmations, divine peace fill my soul,
Mm.
divine love saturate my entire being, or simple ones, I am happy, I am healthy, I am full of
Mm.
love. Repeat. I remember when I was in dire situations, when we're in these awful traumas, we feel weak. I remember reprogramming myself 400 times a day. I would say, I am strong, I am strong, I am strong, repeating, I am strong, until I felt I was strong. And then when I felt I was strong, I was really, I am strong,
Mm.
and getting there. So there are loads of, in my classes, retreats, we use, and like you do, we use dance.
Yeah.
We're putting our feet in the water. We have that beautiful hand-on connection. If it's
Hmm.
just even simply placing your hand just on that third eye, that pineal gland for somebody, just allowing their thoughts to relax down. It's using all the senses, as we said, the five senses, but going that step into the sixth one, going that step into the
Mm.
seventh one, and going the step into the eighth one.
Mm.
Using magic words. There's five magic words out there. I feel like there's believe, there's gratitude, there's visualize, there's affirm, and there's receive. So they're my five magic words. I
Mm.
had those posted up in my wall for years, the five magic words, because I bring myself back to those five. They were keys for me when I was younger. They
Mm.
were the keys that unlocked a lot of doors when I was younger
I
into
love
myself.
that. And you were talking about spirit as we started, and my sister had passed away years ago, and my reconnection with spirit world was through her. And when you talk about the key, one of the things she gave me was a key, and she said, "Here's the key to unlocking everything that's within you already."
Oh, how beautiful.
And because I had locked it away and I had become a prisoner in my own fears and thoughts and everything. And it was so simple, but again, the profoundness of it, and that it was my sister who I loved. And my two words were always trust and believe. And it was
And
simple, trust and
that's
believe.
Yeah. And the trust is where you're going when you're going into that divine energy that we spoke about. It's
Mm.
leaning in to trust, and like we can, years ago, it was like looking for the parking space. You'd think,
Yeah.
oh dear God, please, can I have one right in front of the second door or whatever? And then you get it and you go, Jesus Christ, I'm after getting the parking space. Nobody would believe me. And I used to be saying it to my husband, drive around again now once and we'll get one now the second time. And he'd be there, for Christ's sake. And next thing one, and I'd say, I told you. And he'd say,
Yeah.
no, that car just happened to pull out. But so it's about, so I did that for years, Sharon, leaning
Mm.
into trust. I remember when I started off teaching yoga, I had one person in front of me. So the
Mm.
rent for the hall at the time was something like £20, right? And I was charging her 10. So I used to be paying for poor Mrs. Mullins every week because I couldn't tell her I wasn't going to be there because she loved it. And then, sure, she brought on two after 6 weeks. And then, so I had to trust this was a place I found peace, I found joy, I found healing, I found love. Yeah, I've won, but I leaned into it. I trust it. And I do that still with all my classes because I know
Mm.
now this week I'm back at yoga classes next week and I can see, well, there's 10 people that come every year, but they're not there. But I know they're going to rock in. They won't bother booking or ringing or texting me.
Yeah,
They just show. But I trust that I will have enough people that will sustain me, that I'll put food on the table. There's the reality of it as well.
yeah,
But I lean where I think I lean 100%. I give myself altogether over. I lean 100% because I've trusted that, remember, information, those words, the seeing from when I was very young. So I'm very trusting of
mm,
leaning into that energy, into that divine presence, into that, whatever you want to call it. Some people call it cosmic, whatever, God. I don't
mm,
care, but I lean like your sister. You unlocked. You trust. I lean. So
mm,
it is about trust. And you see, there's a gap, isn't there? You know, there's a gap when you let down something and you're waiting for something else to come in. And
yeah,
that's the place where we trust is in the gap. My,
mm,
my granny used to often say to me, she said, if someone rang your doorbell with a gift for you and you came out holding a load of logs for the fire, how are you going to accept the gift? Well, you have to put down the feckin' logs to get the gift,
yeah,
but we're nearly afraid to put down the logs for the fire in case the
mm,
gift won't come fast enough. So in that space, and we're not in control, of course, of the space or the time,
mm,
but we have to trust. But we are in control of the time we have, though.
mm.
So, it's about managing, leaning into the trust and having the trust in the time as well.
Yeah, yeah. It's, I suppose, going to be an age-old question for people, isn't it, Caroline? And I'm sure they've had conversations, many before podcasts and everything else, where they've sat down across, fires in ancient times and spoke about who are we? What is our purpose? Where are we going? What is the meaning of life? You know, and one time it was all about survival because you had to go out and kill whatever animal or make sure you had crops to feed your family, and you might have moved from land to land depending on, where you could grow your vegetables or your potatoes or whatever it was. And then I suppose we've become so accustomed to the convenience now of our homes and being in one place, going to the shop for our food, having all the information on Google, that everything is a quick fix for us. And I think we've all got lost in that along the way. I include myself. And for me, that's why it's really important to take a step back to have these conversations with wonderful people like you and remind ourselves, that it is when we stop and we look and we say, well, what's actually missing in our life? And that what we're missing is that connection to ourselves. No matter what else we call it, it's the connection to ourselves. And I think we shouldn't have to wait until we transition from the physical to connect back with our soul again. That while we're here alive, just like you've done in changing the way you were living your life, and you're now helping other people connect to themselves, that goes to prove we're living, we're alive, and we're doing the best we can in that life, even if we don't know everything, but that we feel connected to ourselves and everybody else and to nature and to the world while we're alive here and now.
Yes, that's what it's all about,
Mm,
Sharon. It's all about the eighth sense,
yeah.
that wholeness, that sense of union and sense of wholeness. And if you can find things that are in alignment with that value that you have on that wholeness, well,
Mm,
then you're going to have a pretty good life.
yeah. And it doesn't have to look like anything in particular, because when you feel that, it seems that life starts unfolding for you, doesn't it, as well? If you're trusting and believing that opportunities and people will come your way, and that you'll have those experiences that are going to shape and help you grow and develop as well. Well, that's been my experience, and even meeting you, when you came to my retreat and having those conversations and lots of laughs, and then connecting with you through social media and having this conversation, that's proof in itself. When you feel connected to somebody and you're connected and you feel that connection, you never lose that feeling. But then the action is making a choice to do something about it, to bring that feeling into a reality. And here we are on the podcast today doing that, Caroline. So I thank you very much.
Thank you, Sharon.
It's been wonderful, Caroline, and I know we could talk for hours, but as I said, this hour has been a joy for me. And it's also made me feel like we need to speak openly more about our connection to the unseen and unheard, and not to be afraid anymore, out in today's world where there's so much distraction, and talking about war and violence is normal, but talking about connecting with the essence of our soul or with spirit, that seems to be pushed aside a lot of the time. So thank you, Caroline, for this conversation.
Thank you, Sharon. Namaste, Sharon.
Beautiful. Thank you. So you can check out Caroline on Instagram at Yoga Walks Ireland. She's also on LinkedIn at Caroline Conroy, and Facebook. She has a group, Yoga Walks Ireland group, and you run retreats and, as I said, all the beautiful walking groups, and there's yoga classes, and you'll have all the details of them up on your pages, Caroline, for people to connect with you. And if anybody wants to maybe have you for a bespoke yoga walk or a bespoke retreat, or uh, whatever, whatever they've learned from you today, and they feel like, I would like to connect with Caroline and talk to her about creating something for my group or my whatever, they can contact you through Facebook or Instagram as well.
Absolutely, Sharon. Thank you for that. I have lovely groups, and just coming up there on the 5th of October, there's a lovely walk. It's part of the Ballyhara Festival. It's the Moore Abbey walk I'll be doing. That's a Sunday morning on the 5th of October, and there's a lovely retreat in the Cashel Palace on the 18th of October. And then I have all my beautiful walks around the Galties as well. So they are all booked. You can just rock on with your friends, and tell me if you've family or friends in the area or whatever. So yeah, they're all created around the people that come. So they're beautiful. Yeah. And the classes are going on for the whole winter now as well, which is, I love the classes because they're just great crack and they're great
Yeah,
people. We'll be dancing to Tipperary Girl, I think, the first night.
I
Yoga
love that.
poses to Bishop Daniel O'Donnell.
I love it. And it
Oh
is that,
gosh.
it's having the stillness, having the joy. But again, that laughter connection is so beautiful, isn't it? And not taking ourselves so seriously all the time. Caroline, again, thank you so much for
Thank you,
joining me.
Sharon. It was
Beautiful.
lovely. Thank you, Sharon. Take care.
You're
Okay,
welcome.
bye-bye.
So thank
Bye-bye.
you to everybody for tuning in today. And please go and follow Caroline on Instagram at Yoga Walks Ireland, LinkedIn at Caroline Conroy, and Facebook group Yoga Walks Ireland group. And I hope that you have felt something deeply within yourself, or even if you're a little bit curious, maybe sit in stillness for a few minutes and see what your inner wisdom is going to guide you to today. So until next time, take care of you.